Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for black news, black views, and black opinions. Today is Monday, January 31st. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, federal prosecutors are rejecting a plea deal for at least one of Ahmaud Arbery's killers. His family says DOJ lawyers are completely ignoring their wishes. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump begs for votes, promising to pardon insurrectionists if he wins the 2024 election. Then, bomb threats target at least 6 historically black colleges. We'll tell you what the FBI is saying about the intimidation tactics disrupting classes for the second time this month.
Plus, whose house? Rams' house. That's right. Los Angeles gears up for a Super Bowl showdown with the Bengals in their brand new home stadium. How this big event will rake in millions for Inglewood and the surrounding areas. And that's the way love goes. Black Twitter roasted Jermaine Dupri all weekend long. See which revelations from Janet Jackson's 4-part documentary has fans heated.
Lots to talk about today. We have that and so much more. And you know how we do it, in our voice and our truth. You ready? Let's go.
New court filings submitted just last night show that 2 of Ahmaud Arbery's killers, Travis and Gregory McMichael, have reached plea deals with prosecutors in their federal hate crimes cases. But just this afternoon, we've learned that a federal judge has rejected those deals. Now, in a statement from family attorney Lee Merritt, Arbery's parents said they are vehemently against the agreement and say that they expressed that directly to DOJ attorneys in phone conversations over the last few days. But they say that their wishes are being completely ignored. Now, the proposed plea deal, it allows both McMichaels to be transferred to federal custody and serve the first 30 years of their sentences in a preferred federal prison instead of state prison. Now, in a statement, Ahmaud Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, said this, quote, "The DOJ has gone behind my back to offer the men who murdered my son a deal to make their time in prison easier for them to serve. I've made it clear at every possible moment that I do not agree. I have been completely betrayed by the DOJ lawyers." Now, the murderers, the McMichaels and William Bryan, they were all sentenced to life in prison in January for hunting down and shooting 25-year-old Arbery. All 3 men face federal hate crime charges for interfering with Arbery's civil rights, and prosecutors also charged the trio with kidnapping. Now, last night, the Arbery family attorney Lee Merritt, he said that the family was devastated by this, and just today we are learning that a federal judge, despite the prosecutors, as Wanda Cooper Jones said, ignoring their wishes that they have expressed so clearly, a federal judge has rejected that plea deal. And we knew a few weeks ago from our own reporting that she was not on board with this from the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that it happened, that breaking news. I'm with the family on this. Absolutely, this was a backhanded deal, is what the family is calling it. And so at the end of the day, we know that jail is jail. But if you want someone to really feel it, I feel like state prison is where it's at. And so federal prison, many people feel like federal prison has more accommodations. But Sean King tweeted something very insightful. I just have to read this for you. He talked about how hundreds of families are begging Joe Biden and the DOJ to see their cases, only to be ignored. But you have them reaching backwards to cases that have already been closed. Like, I just wonder how that can make so many people feel with their cases being ignored, but you're reaching back on something that was already closed.
You have to give this to the power of protest. This morning, our timelines were flooded from Lee Merritt to Sean King to Tamika Mallory to Black Lives Matter. People were highly upset and the timelines were flooded. And we can never underestimate the power of our voices, the power of protest, because a lot of times it's these types of actions that may push a judge or a district attorney or the government to act differently, because we know Attorney General Garland would be in a lot of trouble or face a lot of backlash if this would have been allowed to move forward.
General population, you know what it's like in there. I know people that's been there, right? Excuse me. At the end of the day, you cannot have sympathy for these men. What they did, they had no sympathy for Ahmaud Arbery on that day when it was an innocent black man just jogging. Justice has to be served all the way through. They cannot go through with it. I'm excited about that. All right, we're also learning today, hours before the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, then Vice President-elect Kamala Harris rode in a Secret Service SUV that came within yards of a pipe bomb, a place outside the Democratic National Headquarters. CNN is reporting the pipe bomb was not discovered until hours later. The FBI is still looking for the person who planted the bomb. It's another example of how security lapse around the Capitol happened on January 6th. D.C. Metro and U.S. Capitol Police were responding to multiple crises, including the attack on Capitol Hill on that building that day. If you think about what happened on that day, there's over 700 people that were there at the insurrection that they're trying to arrest and do things on top of that. But I will say this, thank God that she got her safe, right?
Absolutely. Now, classes, they were canceled at 6 HBCUs, including the vice president's alma mater this morning just because of bomb threats. The threats were sent to Howard, to Southern, to Bethune-Cookman, Albany State, Bowie State, and Delaware State University. Now, Howard ordered students to shelter in place as D.C. Metropolitan Police searched. They never found any devices, but this is the second time that this has happened this month. The first week of January, Howard and about at least 7 other HBCUs also received bomb threats. It's been a very quite disconcerting time for these universities of particular to be targeted, and to hear the news about, Vice President Harris and the bomb that she was just feet away from during the protest, and now this continued bomb threat against all of these various universities makes you wonder what the motive is.
It absolutely makes you wonder what the motive is. And back to Kamala Harris, her security has been a topic of concern for me since the inauguration. When we talked about her house being, there was a person outside her house with a rifle. And of course, now these HBCUs, it just really kind of makes me want to step up the security all around.
Well, this actually takes you back to the 50s and 60s when black people were intimidated by bomb threats. It is a key play for white supremacists. We're not saying that those are the people that have, did these bomb threats, but it's just reminiscent of that. And it's a fear tactic that has been used in this country against black people for a long time. And it's sickening that it's happening in 2022.
It's so unfortunate when you think about HBCUs and all the attention and the positive things that they are getting and receiving. For someone to go do this is very, very sad.
People who got arrested during the January 6th attacks on the Capitol could get a pardon, but that's only if former President Donald Trump gets reelected. Now, Trump made the suggestion Saturday at one of his rallies in Texas. Trump has not officially announced his plans to run in the 2024 election, but he has hinted at the possibility. The insurrectionists were hoping that Trump would grant them pardons before he left office, but he did not. I miss the days when Trump was quiet. We did not hear from him. We didn't hear from him on Twitter, just canceled. I miss those days because what's interesting is that I don't feel like if Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or someone else did this would, the Republican outrage would be, you wouldn't even be able to handle it. Also, he just needs to be behind bars. I don't know, I have too many points, but he just needs to be behind bars because we shouldn't even be talking about this right now.
It's like he's begging for votes. He's saying, pick me, I'm gonna help you.
Yeah, he's stirring his base. He knows exactly who he's talking to. He's talking to the rioters, the insurrectionists, and anybody that is in his playing field. And this is what he needs to do in order to be a viable candidate in the upcoming presidential election. All right, meanwhile, Senator Susan Collins says Trump should not have promised to pardon those rioters. The Maine Republican says insurrectionists should go through the legal process. And for Trump running for re-election, Collins says she probably won't vote for him. She says there will be many other qualified candidates that will run for president.
As expected, some conservatives are pushing back on President Biden's decision to pick an African-American woman as his Supreme Court nominee. Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker is drawing outrage after calling Biden's decision, quote, affirmative racial discrimination. Now, Ted Cruz, he, of course, added his 2 cents, not worth much, but said the president's commitment to picking a black woman is, quote, an insult to black women. Political analysts say Ronald Reagan wasn't criticized back in 1980 when he promised to appoint a woman to the court. In fact, Reagan nominated Sandra Day O'Connor, who was just the first female justice on the bench. Biden is expected to make his announcement by the end of February. It's interesting to see how, despite the lack of representation for black women on the court, there are some people who think that it is just unbelievable that he would limit his pick to just a specific demographic. But that specific demographic has been ignored for the 200 years this institution has existed.
Absolutely. How is a white man going to tell me what I should be offended about? I'm a black woman. If I'm not offended, you cannot tell me if I'm offended or not. Black women make up 6% of America. So we're a very small portion. Like you said, we're not even in the room. So what if a black woman is appointed here? So what? I'm sure there are many black women who are more than capable of doing this job, and it's it's time for us to get what we deserve.
Well, let's get back to when a president is in office. It's at his pleasure to decide who his picks are. And that's one of his privileges. And so this is just a back and forth banter that generally happens when the president has the power to pick and choose who he wants. But we just need to pay closer attention to the 50 Democrats that are senators that will be voting for this to make sure that they stay together so we can get this pick through. And I'm also excited that we could just talk about who we want to be our next Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
And those choices are a black woman.
Loving that. President Biden has to go ahead and make sure this happens. Just forget all the noise you're hearing outside. And shouldn't Ted Cruz be in Cancun around this time
I was
going to
say, he tweeted,
Really?
he was like, the president's saying he doesn't give a damn about the other 94% of Americans, but you didn't give a damn about Texas when you were flying to Cancun while they were out of power.
Take a trip, Ted Cruz.
Okay.
We can go on and on and on about Ted Cruz. Now, meanwhile, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is praising one of the black women who might be on the President Biden's short list of nominees. Graham says U.S. District Court Judge J. Michelle Childs has wide support in South Carolina. He went on to say Childs was fair-minded and highly gifted.
A new poll from Higher Heights for America finds 86% of black women voters supporting prioritizing nominating the first black woman to the Supreme Court. Joining us now to discuss President Biden's potential Supreme Court picks and the importance of the representation of black women in government is Glenda C. Carr, President and CEO of Higher Heights. Welcome back to the Black Report.
Thanks for having me.
Now that President Biden has made the announcement that he will pick a black woman as the nominee for Supreme Court, how important do you think it is still important for the black community to lobby and push him to make that decision really a true statement?
Well, I think there's two things that need to happen, right? He has indicated that he will be vetting over the next month as we enter into February. And so we should continue to put pressure on him actually nominating a black woman. But that then goes to the U.S. Senate. And so the U.S. Senate, there are black women in every single state, in every single district. And we need to be talking to and lobbying our U.S. senators about bringing forth a fair and transparent nominating process, void of the intersection of racism and sexism.
Glenda Carr, Seth Lemon here. Happy to have you with us. Now, in contrast to the results that Higher Heights found, ABC News and Ipsos released a poll yesterday that found more than 3/4 of Americans of all races want Biden to consider all possible nominees, while just about 24% of them want him to follow through on his history-making process to only consider a black woman. What do these numbers suggest to you?
Well, as you're aware, part of the reason why Higher Heights does polling, we particularly want to talk to black women. Oftentimes, black African Americans and black women are underrepresented in polls like the poll that just came out today. And so certainly I think Americans want a transparent and fair process, but creating a diverse bench supports everyone in America. So there's been 115 people who have been appointed and confirmed to the court since its inception, right? For its first 180 years, all the justices were white men. We've had 2 black justices, we've had 5 black women, 4 white, and 1 Latinx. So it's certainly time for us to consider that having a black woman on the bench will create the diversity that you need for that bench to make informed and diverse decision-making during a time where voting rights, women's rights, and the economy continue to be bubbling up around protecting our diversity on the court.
And speaking of diversity or the lack of, no black women in the Senate, no black woman ever elected as a U.S. governor. Talk to us about why it's important to have black women representation in all forms of government.
Yeah, well, first of all, diverse decision-making tables make better decisions. That's in corporate America, that's in the public sector, that's in the nonprofit sector. When you have not only the diversity of race, gender, and political ideology, social economic background, lived experiences, those decision-making tables make better decisions. And currently, Black women are void of major decision-making tables across this country, including the diversity of the bench. We have proven that this is not about just appointing a Black woman for Black woman's sake, or that we are looking to send a Black woman to the executive house in more than 5 states in this country's history. It is about that women are uniquely qualified. Their education, background, bar none, no one can dispute. And then they come from a lived experience as a woman of color, and a Black woman. Certainly, we have proven during the vice president, or as we used to call the beat stakes, when Biden, then candidate Biden, had pledged to have a woman on the ticket and then narrowed it down to a Black woman, that bench was long. There was over 6 Black women named to the short list of vice president. In a week, we show that the bench of jurists is long and deep, and that there are a variety of Black women ready to step into.
There absolutely are. With Justice Breyer retiring, though, he's somewhat a liberal. So just quickly, he's not really reshaping the makeup or the balance of power on the court. He has done that somewhat for appellate courts, appointing a lot of women, a lot of people of color. But and some of his SCOTUS picks come from that list. Does the appellate court's change have more of a long-lasting impact than this particular Supreme Court nominee?
Well, I think it's important that it can't be either or. We can't, in 2022, it can't be let's elect a Black woman governor, but we can't elect a Black woman U.S. senator. We applaud President Biden in his most diverse cabinet, his diverse pick on the federal level, but that shouldn't be that we don't then also want to have a Black woman to the highest court of this country.
We appreciate you being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, Glenda Carr from Higher Heights.
Thank you.
All right, so the Maryland state prosecutor who tried Baltimore cops in the death of Freddie Gray is expected to make her first court appearance this Friday. State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby was indicted last week on 2 counts of perjury and making false statements. Prosecutors say it's in connection with loan applications Mosby took out on 2 Florida vacation homes. The indictment says Mosby applied for the loans against her retirement account, tapping into a provision for people hurt financially by the pandemic. Mosby makes almost $250,000 a year. She denies any wrongdoing.
A newly proposed ballot measure aimed at LA's homeless crisis would punish elected officials. The measure would dock the salaries of the mayor, city attorney, and city council members if the goals of eradicating homelessness in the city are not met. The measure was proposed by LA City Councilman Joe Buscanillo, who's running for the mayor. This measure prioritizes emergency housing as a strategy to end the city's homeless crisis within the next 3 years. Los Angeles has the highest population of people living outside of the nation. The reality of it is that the homeless crisis here in Los Angeles is out of control, and if city council members are not going to do what they need to do, maybe taking money away is what could get them started. Before the pandemic, 60,000 unhoused people. A count wasn't done in 2020 because of the pandemic, but who knows how many unhoused people that we have now. Not to mention with the Super Bowl coming up, they want to move people around all around, so we don't even know where how many people are out there that are homeless right now.
Listen, this state is in a $30 billion plus surplus. There is a way that Governor Newsom should be able to address this homelessness crisis and fix it. We're in a surplus. We have the money. We have the resources. They just need to get it done. State legislators need to push up on Gavin Newsom, and different cities and municipalities across this state, they should be able to push him as well. We see the power of the people is working. Now we need the power of the electeds to work. All right, a California lawmaker says reparations for African Americans should only go to people who are direct descendants of enslaved Africans brought to the United States. Shirley Weber, who is California's Secretary of State, is backing a state bill that creates the first in the nation's task force to study reparations. Weber says while Black immigrants suffer from racism in the U.S., they can always go back home. The 9-member task force is on a 2-year timeline to address the harm of slavery. But critics say California was not a slave state and residents should not have to pay for reparations.
Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf says that he will appeal a Commonwealth Court's decision that struck down a mail-in voting law, calling it unconstitutional. The law that was struck down was established in 2019 with bipartisan support by a Republican majority legislature. But Trump supported lawmakers who filed suit against the mail-in voting program, claiming that it resulted in voter fraud. Of course, there is no evidence of large-scale voter fraud in Pennsylvania or anywhere else in the United States.
A Mississippi mayor is withholding more than $100,000 from the city's library until it removes books written by LGBTQ authors. Library officials say some residents of Madison County complain about a handful of books. A library spokesperson says Mayor Gene McGee ordered the books taken down. It's the latest move by conservative lawmakers in red states who are banning books written about races or issues important to the LGBTQ community. We think about this. Just last week we were talking about how Black Mississippi senators were protesting a bill to ban critical race theory. On and on again, it's these red states that want to go that extra mile, take that extra step to make things inconvenient or to try to take away things from us that's not needed. We need to share these stories. We need to talk about them. Those books need to be in those libraries.
Yeah, Black History starts tomorrow, so we need to go blackity black, 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 because we know that they are trying to stop the narrative of the truth of the history of Black Americans in this country.